not stand on ceremony, mate. Let's start the show.
Hey, we're back. You're listening to 710 Squared Talk, where we discuss the business of cannabis. I'm your host, Loris, with my co host, Ro. And today we have a special guest. But before we do that, Ro's going to go ahead and plug our sponsor.
Yes, everyone. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Numeroom Naturals. You can reach them at numeroomnaturals.com. That's NEWMAROON naturals.com. Please give them a try. They have Caribbean-based root drinks formulated to bring out optimum health in men, women, and children, as well as providers of sea moss in its gelatinous state. You know, it's common medical knowledge that a great many syndromes and illnesses are caused by the absence of micronutrition throughout the diet. And unfortunately, the standard American diet is bereft of such nutrients and micronutrients. But there's no better way to add them into your diet conveniently than with the products provided by numeroomnaturals.com. Please check them out. The website is easy to use, and there's a plethora of information there that you can use to help research the best ways to add nutrition into your diet. So check them out at numeroomnaturals.com. That's NEWMAROON naturals.com, and return to your natural state of health.
Awesome. And now we have our special guest, Kevin Ford Jr., Chief Executive Officer of Uplift, Maryland. Kevin, why don't you go ahead and say hi to the folks?
Hey, how you doing, everybody? And Loris and Ro, appreciate you guys for having me. And, it's always a great day to talk about cannabis.
Indeed, indeed. Why don't you start off by telling people what it is that Uplift does?
Yeah, sure thing. So early last year, I became a patient myself. And through that process of becoming a patient, I realized that there was a lack of a source of information. Sometimes looking at this cannabis industry and even just something as simple as becoming a patient can seem like a puzzle for most people. So what we wanted to do was create a one-stop shop for citizens in Maryland, and specifically minorities, to be able to have a safe space to talk about cannabis and to get the education and training that they need to either become a patient or become involved on the business side. Towards August of 2018, we began to do patient certification. Myself personally, I come from a medical family, so I've always understood, the medical side of it, and really, I really had the opportunity to get my dad involved, who's become a certified provider.
Awesome.
And through that, we've just been able to, get as many people certified as we can. Then around that time, I also applied for a grant from the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission to do education and business development training for minorities and women who were looking to apply for this most recent round of grower and processor application. And from that program, we were able to educate and train about 450 Maryland citizens, as well as we had about, I think my final count that I've gotten has been 6 confirmed groups out of my class who actually were able to apply for a license as well. So we're definitely proud of that. And then secondarily, hopefully that, somebody from our class or someone making sure that, well, number one, just ensuring that we have some African Americans who are at the forefront of leading this next push of licenses. But it would be great to, have somebody from our class who's able to be successful as well.
Awesome. That's great stuff you're doing there. So explain to us, in terms of getting a license or applying to get a license, what is the cost and what does that entail?
So if you just read in black and white, the application process this time around in Maryland specifically, costs $2,000 per application. Now, that may not seem like, well, to some people it may seem like a lot. That's a barrier in itself, just $4,000 applying for those licenses. But to really have a shot, you need somebody in your corner who's a lawyer. You need to have, an accountant who can get some good performance going for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you really need some type of a basic procurement knowledge to be able to even complete this application. So on a range of what I've seen people spend during these application periods have been from that $4,000 all the way up to $1 million.
Wow.
And that's why this is getting a license, especially for minorities who don't necessarily have access to the type of capital that's needed to operate businesses like this. It's tough, for folks to just break in, even when we do have an opportunity, because then it's like, okay, well, who are we turning to get the money that we need anyways? Right back to the majority in most occasions. So it's interesting. I think that we do have an opportunity to see ourselves pushing forward within this industry, but it is important for us to, truly understand what really goes into it. And it's not just that $4,000 that you need to actually put forth an application fee, but, to make sure your application is prepared properly. There are some folks who have paid $150,000 to $250,000, $300,000 to get their applications written for them.
Wow.
So that's, and then even aside from the money that you're spending to get your application together, the competition is high. There are very few of these licenses. They only had this round 4 growers and 10 processor licenses, and with that, all these people are spending all this money, but you still only have a lottery chance to win.
Yeah, because in Canada they have a lottery system, so I think the license fee is $100,000, and even though you apply again, it's a lottery. So basically, they'll pick who gets the license. So even though you may have all the criteria, you might not get it, because there was a girl who was 19 who applied. Her father had the money, and she ended up getting the license. And all these big companies wanted to start working with her to open her dispensary because she got the license, and she was the only one. I think it was some part of Toronto. So the process is definitely difficult, I think, all around, but I think even more difficult, as you just said, for minorities.
Hey, Kevin, this is Ro. I had a quick question for you. I'm thinking about return on investment. I'm also thinking about what happens to this initial capital that people put into getting their license on these fees. You mentioned there's so few slots and it's so highly competitive. What happens to that money if you do not get picked? I mean, is it held in a bureaucratic limbo forever, or is that returned to you at some point? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, all of the money technically is risk money. Like, if you're putting it up, you're losing it. That $2,000 application fee, the bare minimum, is a non-refundable fee that goes to the state for your application.
Okay.
And then all the other dollars that's spent, from that $4,000 up to $1 million is, definitely lost, because you're paying consultants, you're paying professionals to, better your chances on winning. It's really a gambling game.
Yeah, this isn't the slam dunk it sounds like in other circles where they discuss this. This is not for the faint of heart. This is a courageous endeavor to get involved with. It's not like people like weed and you can sell weed legally, so go ahead and make your money. Not at all, right?
Exactly. And then that's half the battle too, because even like the young lady in Canada that you just mentioned who won a license in Canada, she had access to capital, and I think that is the difference that we're seeing, because you can have a great application and say you want to grow, and even if it's a 5,000 square foot building, you still got to go find a 5,000 square foot building, buy it or lease it, and be able to actually operate a successful business that's going to allow you to sustain within the business. And that's one thing that I'm worried about, even with just having a round specifically tailored for minorities, is like we got to make sure that they also pick minorities who are going to be able to hold it down. You know?
Yeah.
Because this business, as you said, is not for the faint of heart. Like, this is the most cutthroat business that I think that I've ever stuck my nose in.
Say that again. It's the most what?
This is the most cutthroat industry.
Okay.
Period.
Okay.
Because you have to understand, we're coming to this is a generational wealth shift. You know, and folks are trying to do everything they can to ensure that we are not the holders of this. You know.
Yeah.
And it's just 100% important for us to, you know, if we're going to be betting all this money, we need to be betting money behind people who can actually do this, and not necessarily just taking a chance because you think you want to be the man, you know?
So how does Uplift? Sorry, Rose. Actually, Rose, go ahead. I got a longer question, so go ahead.
No, yeah, brief question. You know, so everything you just, wow, that's eye-opening. That really peels back the curtain and lets us see a different side of this thing that's not commonly referred to in magazine articles or news reports when you're saying this is cutthroat. And so I just had a quick question. You know, when it's this highly competitive to get involved and there are only so few slots, is this the bureaucracy trying to slow things down so they can figure out a way to best handle and control it? Or are they really picking who they want to have access to this opportunity? Because like you said, it is a general wealth building engine. And so is it that the bureaucracy wants to control it because it still has that stigma of cannabis and people still don't know how they really feel about it, but there's a want and a need for it. So they're trying to slow this down so they can figure out how to best manage it for the benefit of the state and the people? Or are they really, do you feel like, picking and choosing who's going to get these opportunities?
So just because I have applied for a license myself and I do have faith in the commission to make the right decision, I do believe that they're running a fair process right now in terms of just merit of application, how you scored on it, you know, the types of individuals that you have who have experience in certain areas, that matters, you know. So I don't necessarily think that they're just like 100% handpicking who's going to get this. You know, I think that you had to have shown your ability to actually do it in some form or fashion.
So, with regards to Uplift, how do you approach educating African Americans about the industry? What's your methodology in terms of talking to them about, hey, this is not an easy task by any stretch of the imagination, and how do you prepare them for basically what's to come, which sounds like there's quite a bit of disappointment for a lot of people.
Correct. And for me, you know, before education, like educating out of the home, I think education in the home is where we really need to start, you know, and normalizing cannabis as a plant that has healing properties that, yeah, you can, you know, if you do this education, you know, if you do this, yeah, you'll get high, you'll have, you know, some type of psychoactive effect. But at the same time, hey, if you can also microdose to figure out, you know, what your optimal level of medication is. And I think that that's what's lacking right now because we're still in PTSD mode from the war on drugs. And we're hurt. So it's really allowing African Americans to truly see that it's twofold too. The older folks on what cannabis actually is and what it can really do. And then number two, from the younger perspective is, you know, the system is not rigged and you as a consumer are better off being knowledgeable about what you're actually consuming. And that's my biggest thing, you know, for because we always have arguments about dispensary weed versus street weed, you know, and the major difference is the fact that you actually know what you're consuming. Yeah, there are reports, you know, that come out about different vape cartridges and all this type of stuff. Yeah, we don't know what the future of, you know, smoking oil is going to look like in terms of harm on our body because it's so new, you know. But flower in particular, you know, people have been smoking daily for years, you know, and it's just, like I said, it's just important for us to normalize what's going on and take just, it's chipping away at the stigma. That's really what it is. But then in terms of actually educating out of the home, my first thing is, one, you can't educate yourself on this unless you're in it. And the easiest way to get in this is to become a patient, you know, and see from that internal point of view, because that's the way that I figured out where the hole in the market was for Uplift to come in, you know, and it's all about just using that intuitive mind to figure out what needs to be changed, what can be better, you know.
Kevin, I got a quick question. You've used the term becoming a patient a couple times. Is that what it's referred to when you get your license or certification to be able to legally purchase cannabis, or is that the terminology?
And I want to make sure, because license and certification get mixed up a lot. Like, I want to make sure we use license as business and we use certification as patient.
Okay.
Because the licenses are what you're applying for to win to be able to be a supplier or dispenser. Certification, straight patient. The process for that is it's simple in my opinion. You go online, you fill out a form, you upload some information, being a picture, ID. Of course, there's certain parameters for that, so we can certainly assist anybody who needs registration help. And then at that point, once you put all the information in, you have to pay a $50 registration fee to the state, which is essentially paying for you to get a patient card.
And that patient card is that patient card is what you now use to enter a dispensary, because you can't just walk in, as we all know, to a dispensary.
So yes, but even at this point in the process, say you register, you end up getting your patient number, your patient card in the mail, and you just walk in to the dispensary like that, you're still not going to have access to be able to purchase medical cannabis, because you have to couple that patient number, which is on that patient ID, with an actual doctor's appointment by a certifying physician, like I mentioned my father was.
Okay.
So you likely can't just go to your regular primary care physician to do it. There are specific doctors who are registered to be a part of this program.
Because I've seen that people can even apply at dispensaries, or through a dispensary. They have a process that you can apply for the card with the mmcc. So, like you just said, with the doctor facet, does that mean they have a doctor associated with that dispensary?
They do not. So it's funny you ask that, because even as a certifying company, we are not even allowed to have events on site of a licensee, or have an event where a licensee is on site and do cannabis appointments, because then it's looked at as basically like a medical kickback, which is illegal. So no, you can't. Dispensaries, technically, the furthest they can go is helping you register to get your patient number, and then they can send you to the list of doctors to say, hey, this is the list of doctors. You can find one that's in your area. You know, they can't even tell the potential patient, to say, hey, look, Uplift Maryland is right here. They can help you choose your doctor.
Wow.
You know? So that's actually one thing that I've applied for from the MMCC, is the ability to be able to do that. But the compensation requests have all been tabled at this point in time. So we're still, waiting to hear back from that. Hopefully, we can get them to bring that back up for a vote, hopefully over this next year.
So what is it like working with the MMCC?
My experience thus far has been pleasant. I love the people over there. They've been very responsive, and they've, tried to make sure that they've answered every question that I've had. And that's from a patient perspective. That's from a grantee. That's from even applying for a growing processor license. So I haven't had a bad experience personally. Now, I have heard plenty of horror stories of other people who haven't had, positive experiences, but at the same time, maybe, there's a lack of faith in the government, period, especially within our community. So that also really plays a lot, I think, in the opinion of people when they're calling these government agencies, but as all I can say is, to my experience, that it's been a pleasant one thus far.
That's awesome. So how do people find Uplift?
So Uplift, you can find us on our website, which is upliftmaryland.co. You can find us on Instagram at uplift.maryland. Twitter is at upliftmaryland. And Facebook is facebook.com/upliftmaryland.
Mm-hmm. And I guess what I was more referring to, because I was going to, at the end, let you plug that in and share to, get more people to know about Uplift, because it sounds like you guys are doing fantastic work and more people need to know about you. But I was just thinking in general, the organization like Uplift, or how many organizations are there? There are a lot like Uplift in Maryland, or are you a one-off, unique organization?
I would say that we are unique in a way that we do not do just one thing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of companies have, found their niche and stayed to it, like whether they just do certification, whether they just do education, whether they're, a nonprofit organization giving back to the minority community.
Mm-hmm.
But we have tried to really just dip our fingers in all areas of what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so in terms of where you can find us, honestly, the best place is to, follow us on Instagram and, really just look out for the class schedules that are about to come out. We're in the process of planning a one-day cannabis boot camp, which should be in November. So definitely look out for that. And then we also plan to do some live learning experience events over the next year in a couple of different cities along the East Coast. So we're on the move, doing a lot, but catch us if you can. Definitely always reach out. We're responsive, and we really like to be more personal than anything.
Mm-hmm.
I think thus far, even with the grant, we've built a reputation of being intimate with our consumer, and we definitely want to stick to that as we continue along.
With regards to the patient side, because I see you have the adult patients, which is 18 and up, and then you have minor patients, which are people under the age of 18. Talk to us a little bit about the minor patients. What's that world like?
Yeah, so minors, for the doctors that I know that certify children as patients, number one, kids can't go and be their own patient. Under 18, you have to have a caregiver who basically helps administer your medical cannabis plan, goes to the dispensary to actually purchase these products for you. And in fact, kids between the ages of, I believe, it might even be 8 or 6 on to 18 aren't even allowed to go in the dispensary because they don't want them to see what's going on. But Personally, epilepsy, I've seen cannabis and cannabis oil, specifically Rick Simpson oil, work wonders for children with epilepsy. There are countless stories of how the oil truly did help minors really just push into where they need to go. I heard it's also helping minors with on the autistic spectrum as well. So personally, I haven't dealt with too many kids. I think we've only done one child certification to date. But I do have someone who would be willing to possibly speak with you all, who is a pediatrician who's a certifying provider.
All right, that'll be awesome. So as far as the caregivers, what kind of caregiving background do you have to have? Do you have to be somebody who was your specialty was giving care to children, or can you be like, I used to work at an old folks home or something, and you're like, nah, I want to become a caregiver? What is the criteria for that in this particular case?
There is zero criteria besides the fact that I think you have to be 18 and above, and you have to be. You don't even have to live in Maryland to be a Maryland caregiver. Because there, you could live in D.C. Your mother could live in Maryland. She's a patient, but you need to make sure you go get her medicine for her. So it's the same type of process. You're signing up online. They'll administer you a caregiver number, where then you get that caregiver number and you give it to up to 5 patients at a time that you can care for. So there really is no prerequisites for becoming a caregiver. And I actually encourage everybody when they become a patient to become a caregiver as well.
Interesting. What the one thing I see overall, just talking to you and some of our other guests and people we ran into, because you and I met at the Spark Cannabis Networking event, is that stigma is still very much alive and well, and that's what's holding a lot of the industry back. Because my father was a physician, and I'd be interested. He passed away 7 years ago, but I'd be interested to hear if he was still around. Would his views change on cannabis? Because he was he was not for it at all, and they definitely did not see it as a medicine. Because you, I got into it because I had a health issue, particularly with my stomach, and I did not like being on opioids and Vicodin, Percocet, all that stuff. And I discovered hemp CBD soda, and I took 5 sips, and I had relief. And I said, okay, I'm done with the pharma stuff, and that was that. And I closed down my old company and started 710, squared, because I said, okay, I'm going to do everything I can to bring cannabis into the square world, hence the name. So I see that as a recurring theme for a lot of people I meet. There's a personal, usually a medical reason they came into, cannabis.
And it doesn't even always have to be a personal medical reason. Like for example, my mom she's a surgeon. She's a doctor too. She didn't want to hear anything that had to do with smoking or using cannabis or anything. But once she heard that I won a grant and it became education at that point, she was all in. And because my mom right now, she's the associate dean for academic affairs at Howard College of Medicine.
Okay.
And so, that academic medical background is, what she loves. And seeing the medical component, the medical side really starting to get a lot of push, and then her son personally turning it into educational opportunity, where now I'm officially in the cannabis industry and getting paid to do that, was a game changer for her,
Isn't that amazing, Ro?
It is, but it just speaks to when you do your due diligence and you bring validation and credibility to what you're doing, you can overcome a lot of these hurdles. When you mentioned children and the uses of cannabis to benefit children with epilepsy and other issues, I'm just thinking, wow, that's got to be a hell of a stigma to try to overcome. It's already one thing to try to market yourself and overcome the stigma for adults using cannabis, but then when it gets to kids, people kind of get touchy and overprotective. But I think what you've illustrated when you do the due diligence and you really go through the process of being recognized by the state as being legitimate in your chosen endeavor, that helps turn the tide and change people's mind, as you just illustrated.
Yeah, agreed, 100%.
I think a lot of people just they got this, pardon the pun, pipe dream fantasy of, oh, well, it's legal now, let me jump in and do what I do. But in the brief time we've been speaking to you, you just illustrated so many challenges and hurdles that are still out there, and it is not for the faint of heart, judging by what you've shared with us today. So I think people really need to consider that although there's been a lot of strides made and a lot of ground gained, you're still not out of the woods yet.
Correct. It's just been exciting though. Even through the grant classes and seeing some of my participants come out of the class and even start their own businesses, even on the ancillary side, it's been quite rewarding to see how people's minds have just shifted over time, even past, okay, this is cannabis, but I want to make edibles, so I can do this. But it's really just figuring out how do you play within the rules? And the thing is, you got to know the game, you got to know the rules, and you got to know the players, right?
Yeah.
And go ahead.
No, I was going to say, do you see yourself as a pioneer in this regard? Like you're blazing the path that other people can follow you into this thing, or is it just kind of like routine work for you at this point?
I would say lifting as I climb is what I'm looking to do 100%. I want to blaze that path. Do I look at it as that's what I'm doing right now? No. Personally, it's just hard to appreciate some of the small wins when you're still climbing,
Mm-hmm.
And so do I, when I get to where I want to be and I'm at a place where I'm like, you know what, I really did this. Yes, I do want it to be a situation where, people can look at my path and say, well, damn, he did this. I can do this too, because that's half of the reason why I'm in this right now is because somebody, I reached out and to somebody who was already doing it, actually the folks who I went to get my original certification through, like, hey, I might have some patients that I can refer to you guys. Would you just give me a referral fee if I send you a couple patients? And they told me that if I send them 100 patients, that 100 patients a month, then they'll cut me a referral fee. I'm sitting here thinking to myself, well, I'll be damned. I can bring myself 100 patients and go ahead and do this the way that I need to do it. And that's really the motivation that I had to even start Uplift the way that I did.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I think that, once you realize that it does take some grit, and once you get it, and then you realize, like, I can get in this thing. Let me figure it out. You can get there. Anybody can get there. Because as mentioned, even just like a caregiver, there's no prerequisite or anything that you need to do to get into the cannabis industry. You just need a good idea and you need to know how to make it work. I mean, of course, the experience helps you out with that, but that's the purpose of getting out here, getting to these events, networking with different people. Because, as I said, at every class, about twice or three times a class, make sure you're talking to your neighbor, because you never know what that person does that could complement what you're trying to do, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what it's about, is that communication and not allowing cannabis to be such a taboo topic as it's been for so many years.
Yeah. So where are the classes held?
So the classes have passed. We finished the grant program. They were held from January to June.
Okay.
So now that the grant program is actually over, we're in the process of developing curriculum to be able to put out to the general public for engagement that way. However, we still will be doing, as I mentioned, in November, we're planning a boot camp for people to start a cannabis business. So that should be a great event to come to. But besides that, we're really about to be focused on online class materials.
Okay. Are these classes free, or are they paid, or what?
So there will be a freebie that'll go out in order. You know how this works. Sales funnels. Basically, you put your email in, you'll get a free booklet of information, an ebook basically, that kind of gives you. It's going to be an essential cannabis business checklist, where that's free information, which is essentially going to be the exact same stuff that I covered within my grant program. Then, once that happens, then you'll be able to purchase the additional classes that will dive into a little bit more of the information.
Interesting. Rose, sorry, I know I cut you off. You're going to ask him something.
No, I was just, you were saying, I asked you if you saw yourself as a pioneer, and you were saying, when there's so many obstacles to overcome, it's hard to see those small victories that you do accomplish. But what do you feel your legacy? What do you want your legacy to be in the work that you're doing? I know it's still kind of you're still fighting a good fight, but can you see that far down the road right now? Do you kind of have an idea for what you want your legacy to be in this, or what you want part of your obituary to be when it's all said and done?
And just specifically about this and Uplift, I want people to know that Uplift is run by someone who has been an advocate and a consumer of cannabis as long as I could have, and that goes a long way versus a lot of companies out here who are being run by real estate developers who have no idea about weed. No idea. And that alone is one thing that's going to set me apart in this industry, is the fact that I actually know about this, and I've had experience within the industry on multiple levels, and I've been able to create certain connections through that have allowed me to really get where I am and the knowledge base that I have about cannabis thus far. So a go-getter, who wasn't afraid to be black, and who really fought for what he believed in, which was cannabis and the progression of that, and more importantly, just the development of minority businesses and minority entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that's awesome. To switch gears for a little bit, you talked about, of course, minority businesses. You talked about differentiation, and of course, Ro brought in pioneering, because 710 Squared is the second cannabis branding agency in the state of Maryland, and we're the first minority-owned branding agency. The first agency is a woman's owned branding agency. So again, we also see ourselves as pioneers. And again, even with this show, I've had so many people come up to me, send us messages and about how they like what we're talking about and how it's educating them. And again, there's that word again, education. But from a branding perspective, what I see becoming the issue, whether it's dispensaries, whether it's ancillary services, that word differentiation, which we deal with a lot in branding, when everybody's jumping into something, the question now becomes, why do I buy from you? CBD, right. I saw it at CVS. I've heard about it being in, not grocery stores, gas stations. So again, now it's becoming so ubiquitous, and
Right.
the question now becomes, okay, well, you see people, I sell CBD products or CBD infused products. Okay, well, why should I pick you?
So I
And
mean,
go ahead.
and I think our differentiator is the fact that this is truly for us by us. Like I have program and educational training material that is for minorities, and it's coming from minorities. And there aren't too many outlets like that in the nation right now, let alone Maryland.
Hmm. Well, that is awesome, but I think also to strengthen that, for those listeners who are either in the industry or thinking about getting into the industry, developing a strong brand strategy, which starts with, of course, your vision. Where do you want to go?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
This will, of course, look to your future goals. Developing a mission. How will you get there? Will the mission
Right.
support the vision? And then the big
Right.
idea. This is often used as the company's, of course, tagline, which indicates action. Once the big idea is selected, it acts as a theme. For example, like BMW's theme is the ultimate driving machine. So if you're a dispensary, what's your theme? What's your big idea besides the fact that you dispense cannabis? Next, of course, is
Right.
your core values. If you had to choose if you had to choose multiple values that accurately represent the brand, what would they be? Are you innovative? Are you cool? Are you avant-garde? What are your values? These are things a lot of people don't think about. And then your brand
Yeah.
promise. A brand at the end of the day is a promise. So
Yep.
besides, of course, deducing what that is, how do you plan to keep it once you deduce
Right.
what it is? And then
Right.
lastly, target audience and key markets. Everybody will say, "Oh, my audience is everybody's interested in cannabis." Well, there's so many different segmentations or segments of an audience. Are you into the medical side? So again, with the patients, and even the medical side, you say, "Okay, well, I'm medical and I'm patients." What type of patients? Are you looking at veterans? Are you looking at people with serious medical ailments like fibromyalgia? And okay, well, we have specific types of cannabis products that could help all those different segments. Or are you looking more for the stoner guy who he just likes getting stoned and he wants his different options,
Right.
whether it's his
Right.
dabs or his leafs or whatever. So again, segmenting and having customer profiles and knowing who your users are. Where do these people live? What do they do? How much do they make? Um, what are their personalities? What type of stuff do they indulge in? All
Yep.
these are things that a lot of people don't think about when they talk about the branding process. Most people just associate it with visual identity, which is a small, small piece of what a brand is. You have the name, you
Right.
have the story, you have the personality, you even have the language, the imagery, the style guide, the voice. People are like, well, I was like, what does your brand sound like? And people look at me like, huh? What do you mean? I said, if your brand was a person, what would it sound like? What kind of personality would it have? And these are
Right.
things for those who are listening that you have to now think about if you get past the application process, if you if you're going in that direction, or if you're in the ancillary service business. There's going to be a lot of competition. We're still at the tail end of what I call cannabis prohibition, and it's the federal side that I think that's holding a lot of people holding the floodgates closed. But once that opens, which will eventually happen, how do you plan on differentiating yourself? And the only way to do that is by building a brand. For example,
Right.
Disney employees are called cast members. Disney followers are called what? Mouseketeers. So,
Right.
what is Disney at the end of the day? I mean, Disney is more than a theme park, but when you compare it to Six Flags or Cedar Point, when I just think amusement park, I think Six Flags and Cedar Point. But when I think Disney World or Disneyland, it's a lot more than that, even though it's rides and of course they have the movie side and all that stuff, but they've really done a great job of differentiating themselves, at so many levels. And that's what people need to think about when developing their plan to get into the cannabis industry and again dominating. Because if you're not going to do it to win, then why do it?
Right. Right.
Ro, you kind of
Yep.
quiet over there.
I'm
You
just listening,
still
man.
taking your notes?
I'm always taking notes, man. I don't want to beat it. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I mean, I'm just hearing how if you're not on a war footing with your endeavors, especially business wise, you better get on one. One thing I'm definitely taking away from this interview is this new frontier of cannabis and cannabis training and education and business is not for the faint of heart. And in a previous episode, we discussed the warfare of human interaction, and this just really supports that. And I would just encourage everyone to get serious about what you want to do, because everyone else is serious about stopping you.
That's the truth.
Yeah. I'm still thinking about that lady that contacted one of my staff on Instagram, and she was talking about she wanted some branding, specifically some packaging, but she hadn't done strategy, she hadn't done discovery, and she currently had this soap with this cannabis leaf on the back, and she had shrink wrapped it. And she wanted to get it in dispensaries among other products. And I'm saying to myself, if you go to a store and you see all the different brands on a shelf that are all competing for eyeballs, at the end of the day, packaging is what sells the product. And if it doesn't catch my eye, I'm gonna walk right past it. And your stuff is in shrink wrap. You go to
Right.
you go to a cannabis dispensary. I was at one yesterday. Everything is nicely, beautifully packaged, professionally done. If a brand, can't be defined and easily identified by its package. I mean, when you look at, like, if you buy a Fossil watch, look at the box it comes in compared to the packaging of a Breitling or an Omega timepiece. And notice I said timepiece for Omega and Breitling versus Fossil, which is a watch. So those two distinctions right there show up in the packaging, and people need to think about that in terms of their positioning and really take this seriously and say, okay, look, this costs money, as you've clearly illustrated from the beginning, and if you want to become a brand, packaging is one of those things that help to identify you and your brand's unique attributes. So,
But you know what, though? People need to be honest about what their expectation is when they say they want to go into business. Kevin O'Leary on Shark Tank, when someone comes to him with an idea that's kind of low rent or low scale, he'll say that's not a business, that's a hobby.
mm-hmm.
And, I think a lot of people want to make some extra money and, some discretionary income. And to them, they think that's business. And no, that's a side hustle, or that's just a way to make some money. It sounds like this lady that called you guys, Loris, was looking to make some extra money. She just she had the wrong idea. And there's nothing wrong with making some stuff and selling it at the swap meet. There's nothing wrong with that. But you have to understand that that's not really a business. That's a great idea to make some spare change, just like a yard sale or anything else, as the kids. No, I mean, really.
No, I know you.
About it
I'm laughing because it's so true. There's so much truth in what you're saying, but just the way you're saying it is funny. But you're absolutely right. So
our nation, our entire nation and culture is stuck in a hyperbole loop. I mean, if it ain't big, it ain't nothing, and that's just not the case. There's subtlety and nuance in all things. And this lady has a great idea for some soaps that'll sell at a swap meet or a yard sale or a what do you call those fairs, or where they sell the fresh fruit and all that stuff. And it's great, but as the kids say these days, there's levels to this shit. And it's okay if you come up with a great idea and make some soap at home and shrink wrap it and rent a booth at the farmers market and sell your soap. That's great, but be self-aware and have enough understanding of the world around you. Don't be so self-obsessed that you think you're talking about a business at that point. It can grow to a business, But pay your dues first. Understand what your product even is to a consumer before you try to take it to the next level. And it's okay if you want to make some money in shrink wrap, but don't call a marketing firm over that stuff. Nobody wants to pay their dues and understand what it even is that they're doing and what their product is to a consumer. One of my favorite sayings is, a gentleman told this to me. He said, you're 10 years away from being an overnight success. And what it basically means is you're doing the work. When people hear about you, they won't even understand that you have been doing this for 10 years. I don't think people understand how much work goes into being known as a subject matter expert in your field or being recognized for your endeavors. But I just wanted to point that out to people. It's okay to do what you want to do. Just don't deceive yourself and waste anyone else's time with it.
Kevin, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, really just what I heard, especially just on the marketing tip, is just knowing the 4 P's of marketing. Product,
pricing, promotion,
and place.
Yeah.
You gotta know that, and understanding, like you said, understanding your product and knowing that, the way that you're promoting it is not necessarily proper for this place.
Yes, exactly. Positioning.
Exactly. And I think, you definitely just gave some valuable information there. And definitely questions that we like to ask ourselves often, and just making sure that we do have a concise strategy to continue pushing everything forward. Because even my educational background, I got a marketing degree from Morehouse.
Okay.
From there in 2011. This is branding and marketing has really been what I've been doing since I was 14 years old. Whether I knew I was doing it that young or not, it was what I was doing. So I think one thing that we've been able to do is create a recognizable brand in Maryland, especially with our logo, having the Maryland flag colors, the slant. It has, that's gotten a lot of traction thus far. So branding is certainly key to any business. And then even this is a lot of what I want to say, even if you have listeners who are in DC or these other states like Georgia that's about to come up soon. Start creating your brand right now for the future. And you were talking about a tagline, and ours is training our community for the future. We're trying to help people start their brands and get some type of a head start so that, those licenses drop. You're not like Mr. Krabs in a bucket trying to figure out how to get out, like you're ready at that point, and you have one thing behind you and probably some type of brand awareness or just being recognizable to a point that it assists you in making sure that you're pushed forward in whatever you're applying for.
Absolutely. And lastly, with regards to brand packaging, I want to say this. Packaging, even before I got into the cannabis industry, we did packaging. And packaging is you have to know what you're doing, number one. But with cannabis packaging, you really have to know what you're doing. And what I mean by that is there are laws, there are regulations on what must be on the packaging. The type of packaging, is it childproof?
And even down to the labeling.
I was just about to get to that. The labeling, how much THC is in this, how much CBD is in this. So you can get somebody in trouble as if you go to an agency or a company who's like, oh, well, we do branding, we do packaging. Okay, but do you do this specifically for cannabis? Do you know the regulations and the laws and what could potentially happen to both of us if this is done incorrectly? So because cannabis laws again right now are so fluid, because Maryland and DC are percolating in terms of cannabis, but you drive across the border to Virginia, that is not the case.
Right.
There was a guy. Go ahead.
As a business owner seeking to, even seeking for different consulting services, whether it's marketing, branding, or not, that's what I said. Like, you need to know the game and you need to know the rules as a player, and I personally would not put it 100%, 100% of the responsibility on the consultant to know all the rules and regs for my specific organization, especially industry, especially if it's a branding company. Because to be honest with you, there are folks who can do good work, who they might just need a little bit of education themselves, being that this is a new industry. And, especially for young folks my age, I see a lot of different people who have been doing websites or logos and all this stuff. They're trying to do stuff for cannabis companies now. And I just want everybody to know that this is new and we're all really starting off on the same type of playing field. And as you mentioned, these laws and regulations are very fluid.
Extremely fluid.
Just stay on top of them.
And that's why having strategic partnerships with lawyers and people like yourself who and companies that again specialize in cannabis is essential, because they go out of their way to keep abreast of these laws, because they change literally with the wind. And I've read stories about people driving across state lines with products that were legal in their city or in their state, and then they drive across and then they get arrested. Because there was a guy who had a truck full of CBD products that he was transporting across state lines, and the trooper pulled him over, and they arrested him because, again, in their state this was not legal. Now, if he had done his due diligence, he would have known, okay, well, this is probably not a good idea to drive through this state with this kind of material in, or merchandise in my truck. He would have found some other way to, do it. So keeping abreast of the laws and regulations, or like I said, if that's a challenge for you, partnering with people who do, and really collaborating. As I said to somebody I was at the Canna Gather networking event. I said, at this stage in the cannabis game, for lack of a better term, we have no business competing with each other, all of us in cannabis. Everybody should be collaborating to help, because we got the feds to deal with, we have the state, we even have the county, depending on, who's in charge on that level, holding people back. So everybody at this point should be collaborating, and even if you are in similar industries, or if you're in the same industry, there's still services that some people provide that the others don't, and there's opportunities there for cross promotion. There's opportunities there to help each other's clients, just work out the details. But the everybody should be thinking about collaboration and not thinking about competition. Ignore competition. We need to help each other move forward, especially those of us who are people of color.
Exactly. And I always put the acronym team up on the board. Together, everyone achieves more. That's
we'll have to steal that.
The trick of the game there.
We'll have to steal that. All right, we're getting close to wrapping things up here. Is there anything you want to plug, Kevin? Anything that is coming up?
Well, I'm actually speaking at the National Cannavote Summit in D.C. next Saturday, the 28th. I believe my panel is on minorities and women in the cannabis industry.
Okay.
And I think the panel time is at 4:45. But the event will be going on all day. They're going to have vendors. It should be a really nice event. Look forward to being a part of that. And also want to plug my Fraternity Brothers event as well, which is going on in Philadelphia next weekend too, the 27th and the 28th, which is DACO, Diasporic Alliance for Cannabis Opportunities. They put on a great event up there as well. So if you're either in Philly or DC, you know where you should be. And again, follow us on Instagram at uplift.maryland. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, you can too, at K Ford Jr. That's K Ford like the car, JR.
Awesome. So these two events, do they have Instagram pages where people can get the address and the details? What's the cost of the tickets, or is it free? Tell us a little bit more.
So the DC event is not free. I believe the ticket cost is between $20 and $35.
Okay.
But the event in Philadelphia is free.
Okay.
Instagram for National Canna Vote, I believe, is 2 seconds. National Canna Vote. And then Daco is, let me see, 2 seconds. Is We Are Daco. WEAREDACO.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Ro, anything you want to plug before we wrap this thing up here?
No, not a plug, just an observation. I mean, I loved hearing Kevin's story and his insights on the cannabis industry, and something that stuck out to me is that I would just encourage people to be more honest with what it is they want to do and where they are in that endeavor, and understand that there will be obstacles and a lot of self-discovery, and be honest about what it is you want to do, and then go do it without hesitation. But put yourself in a proper orientation and frame of reference so that there's no confusion, so you don't call Loris with shrink wrap bars of soap.
And on that note, we're gonna wrap everything up here with this episode. We're gonna have more guests. We have a lot of great people coming up in the next couple of weeks, and we're also looking at doing some workshops at our facility in Largo next month. And we're really working on building up 710 Squared and educating as many people as we can, especially minorities. So share it with your friends, subscribe. Let's all collaborate and help each other reach the promised land in terms of this burgeoning industry of cannabis. And on that note, I will see you all next week. Peace.